They say the best revenge is success. But sometimes, the best revenge is just letting them hang themselves with their own rope. I watched my CEO steal my $1 million idea and pitch it to investors like it was his brainchild. He thought he was brilliant, cutting out the boring technical stuff from my proposal. He never bothered reading page 11. That was his first mistake. His second? Underestimating the woman who spent 7 years in the shadows, documenting everything. My name is Marla Devine, and I'm invisible. Not literally. Of course. I show up in the office photos, my badge scans at the security desk, and my paychecks clear every 2 weeks. But in the rooms where decisions are made, where futures are shaped and millions allocated, I might as well be furniture. 7 years at Orion Future Systems. And I'm still the woman who gets asked to take notes. The elevator in our Charlotte headquarters has 17 floors. I've made it to the 8th, strategic marketing. Not bad for a girl from nowhere, Idaho, who showed up with nothing but a state school degree and a head full of dreams about changing the world through clean energy. But after 7 years, I've learned that merit is just the entry fee. The real currency here is something else entirely. I discovered this truth slowly. Like developing film in a darkroom. First came the realization that my ideas in meetings would only gain traction when repeated by male colleagues. Then the pattern of my proposals mysteriously transforming into collaborative efforts led by people who couldn't explain the basic math behind them. Finally, the recognition that my Excel models and market analyses were good enough to build careers on, just not mine. The morning everything changed started like any other. September rain hammered the windows of our war room as I prepared for the quarterly innovation session. These blue sky meetings were supposed to be democratic. Anyone could pitch. Hierarchy dissolved. Best idea wins. I'd stopped believing that somewhere around year 3, but I still prepared like it mattered. My laptop screen glowed with months of work. GreenGrid, an AI-driven solution for optimizing urban power grids. Not just another efficiency tool, but a complete reimagining of how cities could manage energy distribution. The kind of innovation that could put Orion on the map as more than just another renewable energy company riding the sustainability wave. I'd spent nights modeling the load balancing algorithms, weekends researching implementation costs, early mornings before anyone else arrived crafting the financial projections. The beauty was in the details, especially the proprietary framework I'd developed for predictive load management. It was all there, documented meticulously, including the technical specifications on page 11 that made the whole system work. Devine, you coming? Brad from sales leaned into my cubicle, coffee breath preceding him. He'd been hired 6 months after me and now ran the entire East Coast division. His secret? Golf with the right people and a talent for taking credit with surgical precision. War room in 5, he continued. Vinny's actually showing up for this one. Vincent Maris, our CEO, 35, Harvard MBA, face of Forbes's 40 Under 40 last year. The kind of leader who gave TED Talks about democratizing innovation while maintaining an executive floor you needed special elevator codes to access. He showed up to these sessions quarterly, made everyone feel heard, then disappeared back to his realm of investor dinners and board meetings. I gathered my materials, including the leather portfolio I'd bought with my first bonus, back when I thought looking professional mattered more than being strategic. The walk to the war room felt longer than usual, my heels clicking a countdown on the polished concrete floors Orion had installed to showcase our industrial chic aesthetic. 23 people crowded around the reclaimed wood table, another monument to our carefully crafted image. I claimed a seat in the middle, not too eager at the front, not too disconnected at the back. The art of being precisely visible enough. Vincent entered with his usual choreographed casualness, sleeves already rolled up, designer jeans signaling he was just one of us, his assistant trailing behind with an iPad and the barely concealed exhaustion of someone who scheduled 16-hour days. All right, innovators. Vincent spread his hands like a benediction. Let's blow my mind. Who's going to change the world today? The usual suspects went first. Brad pitched something about blockchain integration that sounded expensive and unnecessary. Monica from engineering presented drone delivery for solar panels that everyone politely noted as interesting. The energy in the room was performative, everyone playing their parts in the innovation theater. When my turn came, I didn't stand. Standing made you a target. Instead, I slid my proposal across the table, letting the numbers speak first. Green grid, I began, voice steady despite the familiar flutter of hope I couldn't quite kill. AI-driven urban energy optimization that could reduce power consumption by 30% while improving distribution efficiency by half. I watched Vincent's eyes sharpen, the first genuine interest he'd shown all morning. He pulled the proposal closer, scanning my executive summary. "Walk me through the implementation," he said. For 20 minutes, I laid out my vision. The room's attention shifted, became real instead of polite. Even Brad stopped checking his phone. I explained the predictive algorithms, the integration framework, the pilot program I'd designed for Charlotte's downtown district. When someone asked about scalability, I flipped to page 11, where I detailed the technical architecture that made it all possible. Vincent took notes. Actually took notes, not the fake scribbling he usually did. When I finished, the room sat in that particular silence that follows something significant. "This is..." Vincent paused, and I could see him calculating, measuring. "This is exceptional work." "Marla." He knew my name, 7 years. And this was the first time he'd used it without checking the attendance sheet first. "I'd like to review this in detail," he continued. "Can you send me the full proposal? Include everything, all your research, models, technical specifications. Don't hold anything back." My stomach tightened, but I nodded. "I'll send it this afternoon." "Send it now," he said. "I want to review it before my flight to Denver tomorrow." I pulled out my laptop, attached the file, hit send, watched the loading bar crawl across the screen, sending months of work through the ether to his inbox. The proposal was comprehensive, 47 pages including appendices, every detail documented, every innovation explained. "Excellent," Vincent stood, signaling the end of his attention. "Great session, everyone. This is why we do these meetings. Real innovation from unexpected places." Unexpected places? As if I hadn't been here, grinding, for 7 years. As the room emptied, I lingered, saving my materials. Hope was dangerous in a place like Orion, but I felt it anyway. Maybe this was it. Maybe Green Grid would be my elevator to somewhere that mattered. I should have known better. At Orion, the only thing more dangerous than being invisible was letting them see what you were really worth. 3 weeks later, I was eating a sad desk salad when Brad burst into my cubicle like he'd won the lottery. "Holy shit, Divine. Did you see the internal announcement? Vinny just scored a massive investor meeting in Denver. Apparently, he's pitching some revolutionary energy grid system that's going to transform urban infrastructure." My plastic fork stopped halfway to my mouth. "What?" "Check your email. Company-wide announcement. This is huge. He's meeting with Apex Ventures and those guys from Silicon Valley, the ones who funded Tesla's charging network." My hands shook as I opened my laptop. There it was, sent from Vincent's assistant with the subject line, "CEO Vincent Maris, to present groundbreaking innovation to major investors." I read it 3 times, each word twisting deeper into my chest. "We're thrilled to announce that CEO Vincent Maris will be presenting his revolutionary green grid concept to top-tier investors this week. This AI-driven urban energy optimization system, conceived by our visionary leader, represents the future of sustainable infrastructure." Vincent's innovative approach could position Orion as the definitive leader in smart city solutions. My vision blurred. Not from tears. I'd learned not to cry at work around year 2. This was something else. Pure, crystallized rage. His revolutionary concept, his innovative approach. I pulled up my sent emails, confirming what I already knew. September 15th, 2:47 p.m. Full proposal sent to Vincent Maris. 47 pages of my work, my research, my algorithms. My technical framework meticulously detailed on page 11. The next paragraph made me physically nauseous. Vincent spent weeks developing this concept, drawing on his extensive background in sustainable technology and his unique vision for urban transformation. Weeks. He'd had 3 weeks to memorize my work and practice presenting it as his own. I stood abruptly, needing air, movement, anything but the suffocating dimensions of my cubicle. The bathroom was mercifully empty. I gripped the marble countertop, another of Orion's expensive attempts at projecting success, and stared at my reflection. 32 years old, 7 years at this company, countless nights, weekends, holidays sacrificed to the altar of paying your dues. And for what? To watch a man who probably couldn't explain the basic mathematics behind my algorithm claim it as his brainchild? My phone buzzed. A text from my mentor, Patricia, the only female VP in the company. Saw the announcement, I'm sorry. That's all. No surprise, no outrage, just resignation. This was how it worked. I returned to my desk to find an email from Vincent's assistant. Mr. Maris would like to see you in his office at 3 p.m. The executive floor smelled different, leather and expensive coffee, the scent of decisions that mattered. Vincent's corner office was a shrine to his success. Forbes covers, innovation awards, photos with senators and CEOs. He stood when I entered, flash of perfect teeth. Marla, great timing. Close the door, would you? I did, though every instinct screamed to leave it open. I wanted to thank you personally, he began, gesturing for me to sit. Your preliminary work on the energy optimization concept was helpful in shaping my vision for Green Grid. Preliminary work, helpful in shaping. I'm presenting to investors tomorrow, he continued, sliding a document across his glass desk. I've prepared a comprehensive pitch deck. Naturally, I've refined and elevated the concept significantly, but your early input was valuable. I looked at the deck without touching it. My executive summary, reworded but recognizable. My financial projections, rounded to prettier numbers. My implementation timeline, simplified for investor consumption. But something was missing. Is the technical framework included? I asked, voice neutral as Switzerland. Vincent waved dismissively. That granular detail isn't necessary for investors. They want vision, not engineering specifications. I've streamlined it to focus on what matters, the business opportunity. Page 11. He'd cut page 11. I see, I managed. Now, I need you to understand something. His tone shifted, still friendly but edged with steel. This is how companies grow. Ideas need champions, and champions need to be at the right level to execute. Your contribution has been noted. But moving forward, Green Grid is an executive-level initiative. Meaning your involvement ends here. I've already assigned the project to Derek's team once we secure funding. Derek, the VP of Strategic Initiatives, Vincent's golf buddy. A man who once asked me to explain what AI stood for. However, Vincent continued, magnanimous now. I want to recognize your contribution. I'm approving a special bonus for you, $3,000, and I'll make sure you're considered for the next senior marketing position that opens up. $3,000 for an idea that could be worth millions. Is there anything else? I asked. He looked surprised by my calm. Expected tears. Probably. Maybe gratitude for his generous acknowledgement. Just remember, Marla. We're a team here. Supporting executive vision is how careers advance. Making waves. He shrugged. That's how they end. I stood, smoothed my skirt, met his eyes. Thank you for the clarification, Vincent. Please, call me Vinny. We're all friends here. I left his office with steady steps, took the elevator down to 8, walked to my cubicle, and sat around me. Orion hummed with its usual activity. Somewhere, Vincent was probably already on a call with investors, selling my idea with his Harvard confidence. But he'd made one crucial mistake. In his arrogance, in his assumption that vision mattered more than details, he dismissed the very thing that made GreenGrid work. Page 11 wasn't just technical specifications, it was the heart of the system, the proprietary framework that transformed a good idea into revolutionary technology. And he'd thrown it away because he didn't understand it. I opened my laptop and began typing. Not an angry email or a resignation letter, something else entirely. A plan as carefully constructed as any algorithm I'd ever designed. Vincent Maris thought he'd stolen my idea. But ideas were just starting points. The real value was in the execution, the details, the deep understanding of how things actually worked. He was about to learn why page 11 mattered. I didn't sleep that night. Not from anger. Anger burns fast and leaves you empty. This was something colder, more precise. I sat at my kitchen table with a cup of coffee growing cold and planned my response like a chess grandmaster thinking 6 moves ahead. First, inventory. What did I have? Everything. 7 years of meticulous documentation had taught me to save everything. Emails, drafts, timestamps, version histories. My personal laptop contained the original GreenGrid files, complete with metadata showing creation dates months before Vincent's weeks of development. Most importantly, I had the full technical documentation, the complete framework he'd been too arrogant to understand. By dawn, I'd assembled it all into a black leather binder, not digital files that could be questioned or corrupted, but physical paper with its undeniable weight. Every page chronologically ordered, every claim supported by evidence. Page 11 sat in the middle like a beating heart, the load-balancing AI framework that made GreenGrid actually work, not just sound good in a pitch. The next day at work, I was a model employee. I attended meetings, contributed appropriately, smiled at the right moments. When colleagues mentioned Vincent's Denver trip, I expressed enthusiastic support. Such an innovative CEO, I said, the words ash in my mouth. Meanwhile, I researched. Orion's investor structure was public information, but the real intelligence came from LinkedIn. Who were the key decision makers at Apex Ventures? What about the Silicon Valley Group? I mapped their connections, their interests, their investment history. These weren't people who threw money at buzzwords, they were engineers who'd built companies, who understood that details mattered. 4 names emerged as crucial: Sarah Chen at Apex, James Morrison from Valley Innovation Partners, Priya Patel from Sustainable Future Fund, and Robert Kim from Meridian Capital. All had technical backgrounds. All had reputations for thorough due diligence. Here's where 7 years of invisibility became an advantage. I had access to the office after hours, security barely glanced at familiar faces working late. I knew which printers had the best quality, which conference rooms had supplies I could borrow. Most importantly, I knew the executive assistant network, the real nervous system of any company. Vincent's assistant, Catherine, always looked exhausted. I'd started bringing her coffee last year, not to curry favor, just basic human decency for someone drowning in an impossible job. Those small kindnesses paid unexpected dividends. Denver investor meeting is Thursday at 2 p.m. She mentioned Wednesday afternoon, accepting her usual vanilla latte. Vincent's flying out tonight. These venture capital people are so demanding. They want everything in hard copy. Can you believe it? I had to print 5 full presentation packets. That must have been a lot of work, I sympathized. The printer on 17 is better for big jobs. I know, that's exactly where I did them. 25 pages each, bound and everything. She lowered her voice. Though Vincent cut a bunch of technical pages, said investors don't care about that stuff. That night, I printed 4 copies of my own packet, not a competing presentation, that would be too obvious. Instead, I created something that looked like supplementary documentation, same binding as the official packets, same corporate fonts. The cover page read simply, GreenGrid Technical Appendix, Confidential. Inside was everything Vincent had cut, plus the complete development history, emails showing the evolution of the idea, original sketches dated and signed. Most importantly, Page 11 in its full glory. The framework that transformed Green Grid from slideware to reality. Each packet included a brief note on corporate letterhead I'd borrowed months ago for a legitimate project. Dear investor name, please find enclosed additional technical documentation for the Green Grid presentation. This confidential appendix contains proprietary information essential for full evaluation of the system's viability. For the complete innovation picture, particular attention should be paid to page 11. Best regards, Orion Future Systems Strategic Development Team. No signature, no individual taking credit, just information wanting to be free. Thursday morning, I arrived early with 4 FedEx packages. The mailroom staff knew me. I often handled sensitive documents for the marketing team. Priority overnight, Marcus asked, already reaching for the labels. Actually, these need to arrive today. Same-day delivery to Denver. He whistled. That's pricey. Cost Center 4471, I replied, rattling off a project code I'd memorized, executive initiatives. Essentially a blank check for Vincent's projects. The packages would arrive at each investor's hotel by noon, 2 hours before Vincent's meeting. Just enough time for curious minds to flip through unexpected documentation. I spent Thursday in a state of perfect calm. I answered emails, attended a product planning session, had lunch with colleagues. When someone mentioned Vincent's big presentation, I smiled. I'm sure it will go well. He seemed very prepared. At 4:17 p.m., my phone buzzed. A text from Catherine. Something weird happened at the Denver meeting. Vincent's calling an emergency session with legal. Did you submit any documents to the investors? I stared at the message for a long moment, then typed back, No, I've been in meetings all day. Is everything okay? 3 dots appeared and disappeared several times before her response. I don't know. He seemed really rattled on the phone. Kept asking about page 11. I locked my phone and returned to my spreadsheet, updating quarterly projections for a campaign that suddenly seemed very far away. Outside my cubicle, Orion hummed with its usual Thursday afternoon energy. But I could feel it, a tremor in the foundation, barely perceptible, but growing. At 5 p.m., I packed up normally, said goodbye to colleagues normally, walked to my car normally. Only when I was driving away did I allow myself a small smile. Vincent thought he'd stolen my idea. But ideas aren't just concepts you can copy and paste. They're living things that require understanding to survive. He'd performed a beautiful pitch, I was sure. Sold the vision, painted the future, dazzled with possibilities. But eventually, someone would ask about the details. How does it actually work? What makes this different from every other smart grid solution? Can you walk us through the technical implementation? And when they did, they'd remember that mysterious appendix. They'd flip to page 11. And they'd find either a framework that Vincent couldn't explain, or a glaring absence where crucial information should be. Either way, they'd have questions. My phone rang as I pulled into my driveway. Unknown. Denver number. I let it go to voicemail, then sat in my car listening to the message. Ms. Divine. This is Sarah Chen from Apex Ventures. I'm in Denver for a meeting with your CEO. And I've come across some interesting documentation regarding the Green Grid project. I'd very much like to discuss the technical framework outlined on page 11. Please call me at your earliest convenience. I deleted the message and went inside to make dinner. Tomorrow would bring what it would bring. But tonight, for the first time in 3 weeks, I slept perfectly. Friday morning arrived with the kind of corporate chaos that starts in the C-suite and rolls downhill like an avalanche. I'd barely logged into my computer when Catherine appeared at my cubicle, her usually perfect composure cracking at the edges. Emergency all hands at 9, she said, clutching her tablet like a life preserver. Vincent flew back on the red-eye. Legal's been here since 6. Is everything okay? I asked, pulling up my calendar with practiced concern. The investor meeting. She glanced around, lowered her voice. Something happened with the documentation. Vincent keeps asking if anyone sent additional materials to Denver. I widened my eyes appropriately. Additional materials? Like what? Technical specifications, Details about the AI framework, things that weren't in his presentation. She studied my face. You worked on energy optimization proposals before, right? Did you ever submit anything directly to investors? Never, I said truthfully. I hadn't submitted anything. I'd simply ensured information found its way to interested parties. I wouldn't even know how to reach them. Catherine nodded, but I caught the uncertainty in her eyes. 7 years of invisibility had its drawbacks. People forgot you existed, but they also forgot you were smart enough to be dangerous. The all-hands meeting convened in our largest conference room, the one usually reserved for quarterly earnings calls. Vincent stood at the front, and even from the back row, I could see the signs, the tight jaw, the compulsive smoothing of his tie, the way he gripped the podium edges. This wasn't the confident CEO who'd stolen my idea. This was a man whose story was unraveling. Team, he began, his voice missing its usual evangelical fervor. Yesterday's investor meeting presented some unexpected challenges. It seems there was confusion about some technical documentation that made its way to our potential partners. Confusion. What a beautifully corporate way to describe it. This documentation, he continued, contained preliminary technical specifications that don't align with our current green grid vision, outdated information that could have derailed crucial funding. I watched faces around the room, most confused, some concerned, a few from engineering exchanging knowing looks. They'd recognized the impossibility of green grid without proper technical architecture, but hadn't dared voice it. Moving forward, all investor communications must go through proper channels. Any documentation, no matter how preliminary, must be approved by executive leadership before external distribution. His eyes swept the room like a searchlight. Is that clear? Murmurs of agreement rippled through the crowd. I nodded along, just another face in the corporate chorus. Now! Vincent's tone shifted, trying to recapture his usual commanding presence. Despite this setback, I'm confident we can salvage the Apex relationship. I'll be having follow-up calls this afternoon to clarify our vision. The meeting dispersed, but I lingered, watching Vincent huddle with legal and his senior team. Through the glass walls, I could see his hands moving animatedly, the universal gesture of a man trying to explain something he didn't understand. Back at my desk, I found an email from an address I didn't recognize. The sender was listed as C. Morrison, VIP, Com, one of the investors from my research. The subject line was blank, the body containing just one line. Page 11 changes everything. Can we talk? I archived it immediately. No response, no digital trail. If they wanted to find me, they would. But it wouldn't be through my initiative. The afternoon brought more tremors. Derek, the VP who was supposed to lead Green Grid post-funding, stopped by my cubicle looking lost. Marla, you understand AI optimization, right? Vincent mentioned you did some preliminary work on energy grids. Preliminary. That word again. A bit, I said carefully. I'm trying to understand this load balancing framework. Vincent's notes mention it. But he held out a printed page, my page 11, annotated in Vincent's handwriting with question marks and crossed out sections. This seems crucial, but I can't follow the logic. I looked at the paper, my algorithm butchered by someone who didn't understand it, like a symphony transcribed by someone who couldn't read music. It's complex, I said. The framework requires understanding of both predictive modeling and real-time load distribution. Without the mathematical foundation, it's just words. Derek's face fell. The investors are asking specific questions about implementation. Vincent said he'd handle it, but Vincent couldn't handle it because he'd never understood it. He'd seen Green Grid as a marketing opportunity, not a technical innovation. He'd pitched the sizzle without understanding the stake. I wish I could help, I said, handing back the paper. But I only worked on preliminary concepts. Vincent developed the real innovation. Derek left looking more confused than when he'd arrived. Around the office, similar scenes played out. Engineers pulled into emergency meetings. Finance scrambling to adjust projections without understanding the underlying technology. The beautiful corporate machine grinding against the friction of truth. At 3 p.m., another all-hands email. Update. Productive follow-up calls with Denver investors. Some technical clarifications needed, but confident in path forward. VM. At 4 p.m., Catherine at my cubicle again. Vincent wants all original documentation for the energy optimization project. Anything you have from the preliminary phase. I pulled up my files, carefully curated. Emails showing my initial proposals, early drafts clearly dated, everything except the complete framework. This is what I have. Should I send it to him? Print it, she said. He wants physical copies. I printed, watching each page emerge. My ideas, my work, incomplete without the crucial center. Like a heart without chambers, an engine without pistons. All the surrounding tissue, none of the mechanism that made it live. At 5:47 p.m., as I was packing up, my phone rang. Unknown number, Charlotte area code. Marla Devine. The voice was female, professional, unfamiliar. Yes? This is Priya Patel from Sustainable Future Fund. I'm in Charlotte for an unscheduled meeting with Orion leadership. I believe you're the actual architect of Green Grid? My hand tightened on the phone. I'm not sure what you mean. Green Grid is Vincent Maris's innovation. A pause. Then, Ms. Devine, I've been in technology investment for 15 years. I know the difference between someone who understands an idea and someone who's memorized a pitch. Your page 11 is brilliant. Vincent Maris couldn't explain it if his life depended on it. I'm not asking you to compromise yourself, she interrupted. But if there's any additional documentation about the framework, the real framework, that would help us evaluate this investment properly. I'm just a marketing strategist, I said. I submitted my preliminary work to Mr. Maris weeks ago. What he's developed from that is beyond my involvement. Another pause. I see. Well, if your situation changes, or if you remember any additional details about the preliminary work, she gave me her direct number. Investment decisions require complete information. We'd hate to fund something that can't be implemented. After we hung up, I sat in my car watching the Charlotte skyline darken. Somewhere in those towers, Vincent was probably in crisis mode, trying to reverse engineer understanding from my incomplete notes. The investors weren't stupid. They'd seen through the performance to the hollow center. Tomorrow would be Saturday. But I knew there would be weekend meetings, emergency sessions, desperate attempts to salvage the deal. Vincent would promise revisions, clarifications, whatever it took to keep their interest. But they would remember page 11. The missing piece, the heart of the machine that he'd carved out in his arrogance, and eventually, they'd realize that the person who could explain it wasn't the one giving the presentations. My phone buzzed. Another unknown number. Another investor? Probably. I turned it off and drove home. The seeds were planted. Now I just had to wait for them to grow. Tuesday morning, I was sitting in a coffee shop 3 blocks from Orion when she walked in. Priya Patel looked exactly like her LinkedIn photo, sharp, professional, with the kind of presence that made baristas stand straighter. She spotted me immediately, though we'd never met. Ms. Devine, thank you for agreeing to meet. I hadn't agreed to anything. She'd simply texted, Brewhouse Coffee, Tuesday, 8 a.m., off the record. But here I was, curiosity winning over caution. She ordered a cortado and sat across from me, studying my face like a poker player reading tells. You know why I'm here. I'm not sure I do. Vincent Maris pitched us a revolutionary idea he doesn't understand. The investors aren't idiots. We've built companies, written code, shipped products. We know the difference between vision and comprehension. She pulled out a folder. My folder. The technical appendix I'd sent. This arrived at my hotel 2 hours before the meeting. No signature, no cover letter, just truth. I sipped my coffee, saying nothing. Page 11, she continued. Opening to that crucial section. This is elegant. The load balancing framework, the predictive algorithms, the integration architecture, it's the kind of innovation that actually changes industries. But when we asked Vincent to walk us through the implementation, he deflected, talked about vision, market opportunity, disruption potential, everything except how it actually works. Maybe he wanted to protect proprietary information. I offered. Priya laughed, short and sharp. He said the technical details were still being refined by the team. Then he promised Derek would lead implementation. Derek, who couldn't code his way out of a paper bag if the instructions were written on the inside. She leaned forward. I've done my homework. Marla. 7 years at Orion. Consistent high-performance reviews. Author of 3 internal white papers on energy optimization that mysteriously never had your name attached when presented to the board. You're either the most generous colleague in corporate America or the most thoroughly exploited. Those are strong words. These are strong times. She closed the folder. Here's what I know. GreenGrid is brilliant. It could revolutionize urban energy management, but it will fail without someone who understands the technical architecture. Vincent can't build this. Derek can't build this. The only person who can is sitting across from me, pretending she's just a marketing strategist. I set down my cup carefully. What exactly are you asking? Nothing you haven't already done. Tell the truth. Walk me through page 11. Help me understand what we'd actually be investing in. For the next hour, I explained my framework, not the sanitized version Vincent had butchered, but the real architecture, the mathematical models that predicted load fluctuations, the machine learning algorithms that adapted to usage patterns, the fail-safes that prevented cascade failures. I sketched diagrams on napkins, wrote equations on the backs of receipts, laid out the implementation timeline that would actually work. Priya took notes in quick, precise handwriting, asking questions that showed she understood not just the business potential, but the technical foundations. When I finished, she sat back, shaking her head. It's even better than I thought. This could be a billion-dollar innovation, she paused. If it's built correctly, which it won't be under current leadership. Orion has talented engineers who'll be taking direction from executives who don't understand what they're building. I've seen it before. They'll compromise the architecture to meet arbitrary deadlines, cut corners to reduce costs, simplify until the elegance is gone, and you're left with another mediocre smart grid solution. She was right. I'd watched it happen to other projects, other ideas. Death by 1,000 corporate cuts. What happens now? I asked. Officially? I go back to my partners. We discuss the investment potential. Make a decision based on available information. She gathered the napkins covered in my handwriting. Unofficially, I start asking harder questions. Who really developed this? Why is the architect sitting in marketing while the CEO takes victory laps? What happens when we demand technical deep dives before writing checks? And if Vincent provides answers? He won't. He can't. He's already scrambling, calling in consultants to reverse engineer your work. Catherine let it slip when she was booking his emergency sessions. Priya smiled. You know what's beautiful about complex systems? They can't be faked. Either you understand the mathematics or you don't. Either you can build it or you can't. She stood, leaving a business card on the table. My partners and I value innovation, but we value integrity more. We don't invest in stolen ideas pitched by people who can't implement them. I never said the idea was stolen. You didn't have to. The metadata on your original files did. The email timestamps did. The fact that Vincent Maris couldn't explain his own revolutionary innovation did. She buttoned her coat. We'll be requesting a technical audit before any investment, full documentation, architecture reviews, implementation roadmaps. The kind of detailed analysis that separates real innovation from corporate theater. After she left, I sat alone, watching Charlotte's morning rush through the window. My phone buzzed with messages from the office, another emergency meeting, another scramble to salvage the deal. I deleted them unread. 2 hours later, I walked into Orion to find controlled chaos. Engineers huddled in conference rooms with printouts of my framework. finance recalculating projections they didn't understand, marketing trying to craft messages around technology they couldn't explain. And in the middle of it all, Vincent, his usual polish cracking like old paint. He saw me passing and called out, "Marla, good, we need you. The investors are asking about implementation details. You did the preliminary work, help us fill in the gaps." I looked at him, really looked, saw the desperation under the demand, the realization that he'd built a house of cards in a windstorm. "I'm sorry," I said, loud enough for others to hear. "I only worked on preliminary concepts. The real framework, the technical innovation, that's all yours, Vincent. I wouldn't want to confuse things with my basic understanding." His face went through several expressions before settling on trapped fury. Around us, people pretended not to watch while hanging on every word. "We'll discuss this later," he managed. "Of course," I smiled. "I'm sure you'll figure it out. You always do." I walked to my cubicle, sat at my desk, and opened my email. 3 messages from investors. 2 from reporters who'd heard about Orion's revolutionary announcement, 1 from a headhunter asking if I was interested in new opportunities. I archived them all and got back to work. The beauty of a good system is that once it's in motion, it doesn't need constant intervention. The questions had been asked, the doubts had been planted. The framework had been exposed as both brilliant and incomprehensible to those claiming ownership. All I had to do now was wait for gravity to take over. Thursday arrived with the kind of corporate storm that starts with a conference call and ends with careers in ruins. I was refilling my coffee when Catherine rushed past, her phone pressed to her ear, speaking in the clipped tones of barely controlled panic. "Yes, sir. The investor call is at 10. Legal will be present. Yes, I've gathered all the documentation you requested." The entire floor buzzed with nervous energy. The investor call, not a meeting, not a discussion, but a call. The kind where decisions had already been made and you were just being informed of your fate. At 9:45, Vincent emerged from his office looking like a man preparing for execution. His usual swagger was gone, replaced by something brittle and desperate. He caught sight of me by the coffee machine, and his jaw tightened. "Conference room A," he said, not quite meeting my eyes. "You're needed for the call." I followed him into the glass-walled room where Orion's senior leadership had assembled. Legal sat at one end, their faces professionally blank. Derek fidgeted with his pen. The CFO scrolled through his phone with the intensity of someone hoping for a last-minute miracle. At exactly 10 a.m., the conference phone lit up. 4 names appeared on the screen: Sarah Chen from Apex, James Morrison, Priya Patel, and Robert Kim. The 4 horsemen of Vincent's apocalypse. "Good morning, everyone." Sarah's voice was crisp, businesslike. "Thank you for making time for this call. We have some concerns about the Green Grid project that need immediate addressing." Vincent leaned forward. "Of course, we're happy to clarify any—" "Let me stop you there, Vincent." This was James Morrison. "We've completed our technical due diligence. We've had 3 independent firms review the documentation. We have questions. Starting with—" Priya's voice joined in. "Who actually developed the Green Grid framework?" Silence filled the room like water. Vincent's mouth opened, closed, opened again. "As I explained in Denver, this was a collaborative effort. No. Robert Kim this time. We're not interested in corporate speak. We have emails dated September 15th showing complete technical documentation sent from Marla Devine to you. We have the original files with metadata. We have page 11, the framework you couldn't explain. So I'll ask again, who developed Green Grid?" Every eye in the room turned to me. I sat perfectly still, hands folded, expression neutral. "There seems to be some confusion." Vincent tried again. "Marla contributed preliminary work, but the innovation, the vision—" "Can you explain the load balancing algorithm?" Sarah interrupted. "Right now. Walk us through the mathematical model on page 11. More silence. Derek shifted uncomfortably. Legal started taking notes. "The algorithm uses predictive modeling," Vincent began. "Which type?" Priya pressed. "Linear regression, Neural networks, random forests. What's the training data? How do you prevent overfitting? Vincent's face had gone pale. These are implementation details that our technical team— Stop! James's voice cut through like a blade. We're done playing this game. Ms. Devine, are you on the call? Yes, I said simply. Can you explain the algorithm? I looked at Vincent. He gave an almost imperceptible shake of his head, but I was done taking his signals. The framework uses ensemble learning, I began, my voice steady. 3 neural networks running in parallel, one for historical pattern recognition, one for real-time load analysis, and one for predictive modeling. They vote on optimal distribution patterns with weighted confidence scores based on past accuracy. Page 11 details the specific architecture, including the feedback loops that allow continuous learning without system interruption. Thank you, Sarah said. That matches our technical review. One more question. Whose idea was Green Grid? The room held its breath. This was the moment, the cliff edge where I could step back or jump. The concept, research, development, and technical architecture were all my work, I said clearly. I submitted the complete proposal to Mr. Maris on September 15th for our innovation session. He asked for all documentation, including technical specifications. I provided everything. Including page 11? Especially page 11. It's the heart of the system. Another silence, but this one felt different. Decisive? Thank you, Ms. Devine. James said. Vincent, do you dispute any of this? Vincent's lawyer leaned forward to whisper urgently in his ear. After a moment, Vincent spoke, his voice flat. I may have misrepresented the origins of certain aspects of the project. You committed fraud, Robert stated bluntly. You pitched stolen IP as your own innovation. You sought investment under false pretenses. Do you understand the legal implications? Now wait, the lawyer started. No, you wait. Priya cut in. We're pulling all funding consideration. Effective immediately. We'll be notifying other potential investors of our findings, and we'll be pursuing legal action if any portion of Green Grid is developed without proper attribution and compensation to Ms. Devine. This is extreme, Vincent tried. This is consequences. Sarah said coldly. We invest in innovation, not theft. We fund visionaries, not plagiarists. Orion has 48 hours to provide us with a plan for proper attribution of the Green Grid project. Or we'll ensure every investor group in the country knows exactly what kind of company you're running. The call ended with a click that sounded like a coffin closing. For a moment, nobody moved. Then Vincent stood abruptly, his chair scraping against the floor. Legal, my office. Now. He strode out without looking at anyone. Derek mumbled something about checking with his team and fled. The CFO followed, already calculating the crater this would leave in their projections. I remained seated as the room emptied until only Catherine remained, still clutching her tablet. You knew, she said quietly. You knew this would happen. I knew the truth would come out, I replied. It always does, eventually. She studied me for a long moment. They're going to destroy him, his reputation, his career. This will follow him everywhere. He had a choice. He could have said, Great idea, Marla, let's develop this together. He could have given credit. He could have been the leader who recognized talent instead of stealing it. I stood, smoothing my skirt. He chose differently. I walked back to my cubicle through a floor gone silent. Word traveled fast in corporate environments. Everyone knew something seismic had happened, even if they didn't know the details. My email was already pinging with messages. 3 from the investors who'd been on the call, 2 from reporters who'd somehow already heard, 1 from Orion's board of directors. But the one that mattered was from Patricia, my mentor. Heard what happened, proud of you, this took courage. Courage. Was that what this was? Or just exhaustion with accepting less than I deserved? I looked around my cubicle, 7 years of life in a fabric-walled box. 7 years of watching my ideas walk out the door in other people's mouths. 7 years of being told to wait my turn, pay my dues, not make waves. The waves had finally come, and Vincent Maris was drowning in them. My phone buzzed. Priya Patel. We'd like to discuss Green Grid's future with the right leadership. Interested? I typed back. Yes. Because the best revenge isn't just revealing the truth, it's building something better from the ashes of what burned down. The news broke on a Monday. Orion Future Systems CEO Vincent Maris steps down amid IP controversy. The business press was surprisingly gentle. Corporate America protects its own, even in disgrace. But LinkedIn told the real story through whispers and careful comments. Everyone in clean tech knew what had happened. Vincent's golden boy image was permanently tarnished. I cleaned out my desk that same morning. Not fired, Orion wouldn't dare. Not with potential lawsuits hanging over their heads. But there was nothing left for me there. 7 years of invisible work had suddenly become very visible, and neither the company nor I knew what to do with that. Catherine helped me pack, her usual efficiency tinged with something like regret. For what it's worth, she said, wrapping my coffee mug in newspaper. We all knew you were brilliant, we just didn't do anything about it. That's the system, I said, not unkindly. It's designed to maintain itself. 2 weeks later, I sat in a different conference room in a different city. Across from me, Priya Patel and her partners laid out terms that made my hands shake under the table. Not a job offer, a partnership. 40% equity in a new venture built around Green Grid. My name on the patents. My vision driving the development. We'll need a CEO, Priya said. Someone who understands both the technology and the business. Someone who can build a team, manage investors, scale a company. I'm a marketing strategist, I said automatically. No, James Morrison corrected. You're an innovator who got stuck in marketing. There's a difference. They gave me a week to think about it. I spent it walking Charlotte's streets, trying to imagine myself in that role. CEO, the person in charge, making decisions, taking credit and blame in equal measure. It felt like trying on an expensive coat, luxurious but not quite fitting. Then I remembered Vincent's office, the awards, the photos, the careful construction of success. He'd built all that on foundations of sand, on other people's ideas and efforts. I could build something real. I called Priya. I'll need help, advisors, mentorship. Already arranged, she said. We don't invest in ideas, Marla. We invest in people, and we protect our investments. GridLogic Inc. launched 6 months later. I hired carefully, engineers who understood the vision, salespeople who could explain complex systems simply, operations, people who valued precision over flash. Several came from Orion, following the real innovation instead of the corporate machinery. Derek applied. I turned him down politely. Some bridges were meant to stay burned. The hardest part wasn't the technology or the funding or even the imposter syndrome that woke me at 3 a.m. wondering what I was doing. It was the visibility. After 7 years of strategic invisibility, being seen felt like standing naked in a spotlight. Every interview, every conference, every investor meeting required me to claim space I'd been trained to yield. But I learned how to walk into a room like I belonged there, how to present my ideas without apology or qualification, how to say I built this without my voice wavering. A year after that phone call destroyed Vincent's career, GridLogic signed our first major city contract, Charlotte. Ironically, the press release included a photo of me shaking hands with the mayor, the city skyline gleaming behind us. Someone from Orion leaked it to their internal newsletter with the caption, "Former employee makes good." Former employee, as if that's all I'd ever been. That night, I found myself in the same coffee shop where Priya had first validated my truth. I'd bought the whole company coffee and sent them home early. A CEO perk I was still getting used to. The barista recognized me now, knew my order, asked about the business with genuine interest. I sat with my laptop, working on our next proposal. Boston was interested, San Francisco had questions. The framework I detailed on page 11 was becoming reality, city by city, grid by grid. My phone buzzed. A LinkedIn notification. Vincent Maris had viewed my profile. No message, just that digital ghost of a man whose theft had ironically freed me. I wondered what he thought. Seeing my title, CEO and founder, GridLogic Inc., the position he'd held through politics and performance while I'd held it through knowledge and creation, I closed LinkedIn and returned to my work. There was a peculiar satisfaction in building something real, something that worked because the math was solid and the vision was true. Every successful implementation felt like validation, not just of the technology, but of the years I'd spent in the shadows, learning, preparing, understanding. The elevator in GridLogic's building only had 5 floors. We'd taken the entire top level, not for the prestige, but for the natural light that flooded the open workspace. My office had glass walls by choice, transparency in all things. On my desk, printed and framed, sat page 11 of the original Green Grid proposal. My handwriting, my calculations, my framework. A reminder that ideas matter, but understanding matters more. That theft might give you a moment in the spotlight, but it won't teach you how to build. Sometimes young engineers ask me about my time at Orion, about the controversy, about how I'd survived 7 years of invisibility. I told them the truth, that revenge wasn't the goal, just a byproduct. The goal was building something that couldn't be stolen because I was the only one who truly understood it. But how did you know to save everything? They'd ask. The emails, the documentation, the metadata? Because, I'd say, in corporate America, your memory is only as good as your paper trail. Document everything, save everything, and never, ever assume that merit alone will be enough. The last time I saw Vincent was at an industry conference in Denver. He was working for a consulting firm, his bio carefully scrubbed of his Orion years. We passed in the hallway between sessions. He stopped, started to speak, then seemed to think better of it. Page 11, he said finally. I should have read page 11. You should have, I agreed. But more than that, you should have asked who wrote it. I walked away before he could respond, heading to the main stage where I was giving the keynote on urban energy transformation. The auditorium was packed, city planners, utility executives, investors all eager to hear about the future of smart grids. Standing at the podium, looking out at hundreds of faces, I thought about that elevator in Orion, how I'd stood in that small box every day for 7 years, pressing the button for floor 8, accepting the limitation as if it were natural law. Now I had my own elevator, my own building, my own company. But more than that, I had my name on my work, my voice explaining my ideas, my vision becoming reality on my terms. The spotlight found me as I began to speak. This time, I didn't step aside to let someone else stand in it. This time, I owned the light and the shadow both. Good evening, I said, my voice clear and strong. My name is Marla Devine, and I'm here to talk about the future of urban energy. Let me start by telling you about page 11. The audience leaned in, ready to listen, and for the first time in my professional life, I was ready to be heard. Thank you for listening to this story of corporate revenge and justice. I'd love to know where you're listening from. Drop a comment below, and let's connect. If you enjoyed this story, please subscribe to the channel and share your thoughts. What would you have done in Marla's position? Let me know in the comments.